The problem isn't that it isn't happening or that you're not manifesting your dream life or your promised land. It's that you think that it isn't. It's because you're waiting on external validation or you're waiting for some type of affirmation or proof when you are the proof. Welcome, Heaven on Earthers, to today's transmission of the Ministry of Assumption Absolute. I am your host, Lucian St. James. Manifestation from a non-dual perspective is what we're talking about here. We're going to take a paraphrased, more narrative, metaphysical look at scripture, because I think there's a lot of power in this story in terms of our promised land. Because the ministry ideology is that, ooh, baby, don't you know what that's worth? Heaven is a place on earth, Belinda Carlisle. But that heaven is right here, and heaven being everything associated with what's total, complete, full, absolute alignment and desire for you. That's going to vary person to person, but it's the understanding that everything is already here now, that we're experiencing the infinity of parallel realities. However, what we see as a reflection of that all is dependent upon our persistent points of focus and the state of our being. What we say is true for and as the certainty of ourselves. And if an experience has been repeated over and over and over again, and we erroneously assign a type of linearity to time, we then can fall victim to the belief that circumstances are happening to us, and that they're happening to us as a result of cause and effect, meaning this thing has happened over and over and over again. I now have a conditioned expectation of that thing, and because I now have a conditioned expectation of that thing, I believe that there's a type of permanence to the condition that I have assigned as truth simply because it happened once. It was emotionally impactful. It was emotionally salient. In order to protect myself from that event, again, I developed a protective mechanism of pattern recognition that was associated with triggers, saying that if these things happen in this certain sequence, danger, negative situation, that's now become a certainty. That's now a part of my state. That's what I pay attention to. That's what I'm predicting. And that's what I keep manifesting, when really I'm the source of all of this. So that's the quick layout of what's happening here in reality. But we're going to take, if you're here and you're wondering, where's, if you know, and that's the whole thing, you know, if you're a part of this channel, you are a heaven on earth, meaning that it's all here now, but it is a matter of frequency, it's a matter of perception, it's a matter of assignment, it's a matter of assumption. So let's take a look at Hebrews 3, and it's presumably Paul that wrote this, or at least somebody in his immediate circle that is writing a letter to some early Christians that have recently exited traditional Judaism, and none of that really matters. I mean, you know, I think the God of the Bible is an archon. Like, I'm a Gnostic, so like none of it really matters. But the narrative backdrop serves the purpose of what I am attempting to communicate today. So, point being, somebody in Paul's circle writes this letter and refers back to the story in Exodus where the Israelites escaped. And what's impactful about this is that he refers to that first generation of Israelites, that all the plagues, all the stuff that happened to Pharaoh, right, that caused Pharaoh to free the Israelites from slavery. Then they wander the desert for 40 years. So I'm paraphrasing all this, but you know, the reference points are Hebrews 3 and 4. We are going to take a specific look at scripture a little bit later on. But they wander the desert for 40 years, and that actually wasn't supposed to happen. They're promised, to think about that, like your heaven on earth, your promised land is already here. But because we have tied safety to circumstance, because we have made circumstance the source, because we have made SP the source, because we have made the job the source, because we have made what our parents said or what the government says or what the economy says as the source, because we have ascribed this type of absolute truth to what is happening outside of us as the determinants of what we're allowed to experience internally, and thus what we continue manifesting externally. Because we look at the circumstance as truth, We're not living in the promised land. The promised land has nothing to do with circumstance. And we see this story in the Bible because, the story that Hebrews 3 is actually referring back to. So Paul, or one of his, cohorts, associates, is writing it as a letter of encouragement in Hebrews 3, saying, look at what happened to them. Don't do it that way. And what he's referring to them not doing is that they wandered the desert for 40 years and they never got to their promised land, because the promised land was supposed to be the land of the Canaanites, but it was already occupied. So and that can be allegorical for, it doesn't, you're quote unquote manifesting against all odds, right? Like you haven't gotten the letter back that you were hoping to receive. You haven't gotten indication that there's any type of movement. You're looking on their Instagram and it seems like they're happy with someone else. Like, you're looking at the circumstance and it's like, there's no way this can happen. So you freed me from Pharaoh, meaning that I just was released from some form of slavery. And the slavery truly, really, that we're all subject to prior to awakening, which awakening is just understanding that you are source of all of it. That this is kind of, you can liken it to a holographic reality, a video game. I talk about the pen, the divine pen of the I Am storybook. You can see yourself really as a kind of character that is the expression of source, that we are individualized expressions of the all that is. So you're seeing this type of impossibility, right? Like they were freed, not only physically, but they were never freed. The Israelites were never free, at least that first generation, because their kids ended up making it to the promised land by inheritance, but they were never freed mentally. They left. Were free. They didn't leave, but they were released from slavery under Pharaoh, but they never understood themselves to be taken care of and protected by God. And I'm not talking about like a Christian God, a man in the sky who's, smiting people and doing all this angry shit. What I'm talking about is like the all, the is, that like once they left, they were continuing to look at the circumstance for their safety. And they actually never, at least that first generation, they never found it. They never, and how many of us will die? And I know referring back to my past lives, I mean, they've just been an absolute mess. That we never wake up, we never get to our promised land, meaning we never understand ourselves to be safe, to be secured, to be taken care of, and to be the author of what we're experiencing in our lives. We never understand that we're divinely protected, that we are really kind of, I was thinking like swaddled, but there is a higher intelligence that is operating above us, that, I and the Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. And the Father being, I don't describe all that patriarchal stuff, but, really more of the field, that we don't understand ourselves to be taken care of. And when we don't trust ourselves as source, when we don't trust the field, when we don't trust the divine line of infinite intelligence, we then sublet our trust to the circumstance. And the reason that they never got to the promised land was because they looked at the land of the Canaanites. I think it was Moses that sent some, spies, or sent some emissaries, sent two of his people out to scope out the land. And he's like, yeah, that's that land is not empty. That promised land that we were told to go into, it's not free. It's not just like open space. And the people there are not like, without welcome arms, with open arms. It's not a good situation. So then the Israelites are like, okay, so we were just freed from Pharaoh. We're wandering this desert. We have no resources. We were told to go to the promised land. And the promised land, so again, this is like, seems like that impossible circumstance, right? And the promised land, how is that a promised land? That looks impossible. That looks like a barrier. That looks like an obstacle. That looks like something, what are we really going to do about that? And the promised land was not the promise of, there's not going to be any barriers. There's not going to be any obstacles. The promise was in the end that this land is yours. Now, you get into that and you talk about like, wars and killing, and none of that's really my point, but I just do think that there is an impactful point here that Paul, or one of his associates, was making in Hebrews 3, the first generation, they never actually got there. And you don't want to be one of those people that never actually gets to your promised land because you're waiting on the circumstance to clear. And if you're waiting on this Canaanites to just like leave, to just like boop on out of there. Like, they're not going to. And that's what can be referred to, you know, as the challenges and the obstacles, or the quote unquote test of the universe. But like, you know, I don't really like that idea. A lot of teachers in this space talk about, you know, you're being tested. I don't really like that, because it seems so persecutory, right? Like, I'm being persecuted by the universe in order for me to prove who I really am. Like, there's nobody, there's no, like, I don't feel like divine counsel, like, you know, they just said they were abundant, let's test them. I don't really believe in that. But here's the thing, what the hell do I know? I don't know that there's not a divine counsel out there. I don't know that your guardian angels aren't placing. I don't know that you didn't arrange it in your life, in your story, through your birth chart, through your past lives, through your karma, through whatever it is you do or don't believe in, to experience certain obstacles, to test yourself in order to grow. Because I do believe that everything, Ram Dass says this, that everything can be a vehicle for your transformation. So I don't believe in the idea of tests, but I do believe that everything can be a vehicle for your transformation. And in order for us to stay in the end, we have to navigate these seeming, the appearance of these challenges and of these obstacles, while remaining centered in the fact that I am sourced in the promised land is mine, meaning that like my desired end, what I feel I should, not what I feel, but what I know I am entitled to experience in this life as an individualized expression of God. Because, you know, you should have everything you want. And I'm not talking about on a material, in a material aspect of things. Obviously, that would be a part of all of this, but there's no reason to struggle and to strive and to effort and to be riddled with, and I, you know, as from experience, riddled with despair and agony and addicted to smartphones and substances and chocolate and heroin, like, you know, to be subject to all of these forces outside of us, because none of those forces are the source. None of those circumstances are the source. So your promised land is already here, but it is a matter of you perceiving it and staying in that end. So, you know, when you stay in the end of, this is my life, this is my relationship, this is my love, this is my job, this is my career, this is my income status, this is my love, this is my fulfillment, my wholeness, my absolute, this is what I see for myself, and I'm going to give myself to that in imagination, as an emotional reality, as a state of self, right here, right now, because I don't need the proof. I don't need the land to be cleared to know that the land is mine. Now, however the land's going to get cleared, I don't know. I might have to be a part of some processes, but how are you going to be part of those processes? Are you going to approach those processes as, this isn't mine, so I have to force and fix and prove and go to war with reality or the Canaanites in order to earn my promised land? Or do I take actions from the place knowing that it is already mine? I am already whole. Everything is already here. It's a matter of my assignment to the truth as such. So in Hebrews 3:17, you know, Paul, or one of his cohorts, is referencing this and says, and this is the NIV translation, and to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see that they were not able to enter, you know, referring to the promised land, because of their unbelief. And you replace unbelief with knowledge. So yeah, if you don't know that you're source, if you don't know that you're divinely protected, if you don't know that you're covered, that you are an individual expression of the absolute, that everything is already taken care of, and you're looking at the circumstance, of course there's no reason to proceed. Of course there's all the reason to fall victim to the circumstance. It looks like it's the end if you are looking at the circumstance as a source. Because if you're looking at the circumstance as a source, and the source, the perception of the source as a circumstance looks like the end, then you give up. Then you give up and you die in the desert. Think about that symbolism. You don't want to die in the desert. You don't want to keep waiting for the circumstance, for what you know. You are the source. You are the energetic point of creation of all that you see. You don't want to die in the desert waiting on the circumstance to show you something that the circumstance is not going to show you until you are solid within yourself as to what the end is. So you don't want to die in the desert. They were not able to enter. You will not get what you want in life until you know that it is already yours. And along the way, it might not look that way. There's going to be the appearance of challenges and obstacles and barriers and stressors. But those are appearances. Think about those as appearances along the way. You got this long desert ahead of you. You're wondering, How are we going to get through this? What's the resources like? What are the water? That can't, where's the water? That can't be the concern, because if that's the concern, you've now decided that I'm not the source. I'm not the one in control. I am not the energetic point of origin. I am more concerned about how this is going to work out, rather than knowing that in my state of I am, in my state of declaration, in my state of being, and through the persistent points of my attention, that is what will manifest, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of what it seems might happen in between. And it's really, and it's not necessarily a conceptual knowing, but it is a deep gnosis and an understanding of embodiment within the self, that I am source. Because if you don't start there, if you don't understand that you are an individualized expression of source, of the all that is, then all of this seems like clinging and grasping and trying to convince yourself of something. So the Hebrews 3:19, so we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief, that nothing that you want, you're going to keep, man, I always say that you're a master manifester. You are already, everything you're seeing is already a product of you. However, in order for you to direct your attention towards desirable outcomes, if you don't, not belief, because belief implies doubt, belief implies I don't really know. So I translate some of this. If you don't know that you're already the source, and in knowing that you are the source, that the end is inevitable, regardless of how and why and what the timeline looks like gets you there. If you don't know that, then it's going to look like grasping and clinging and trying to convince yourself of something. So it's, be still and know, and resting within that you are an expression of the all that is. Jesus Christ, Yeshua, and the Christ just means the anointed one, so Yeshua the Christ, Yeshua the anointed one, just came to show us that we're already all of everything, because we can only see what we are. And if we are able to observe the divinity of a man on earth and know that that was an expression of God, that, Yeshua and God were one, but, the Father, the total, the absolute, the field was greater than he, and we're able to observe that in him in human form, then we're able to observe it in us. Like the message was just in his be, all the stuff he said, fine, but the message was in just our observation of his being, of the divine within a human form. That's what the message was. It wasn't follow me and worship me and create religions and go to war and fight people over what interpretation of what you think I said was right. That was fully not the message. The message is that it's you. That you are the all. Yeshua even said at one point in time, you will do greater works than I. And you don't have to save the world. You save the world by saving yourself, by realizing that the second coming is you. The second coming is you understanding, opening that eye, waking up and realizing that it was you all along, that you're creating all of this, that you're participating in all of this, that you are the act of the creation, the created, and the act itself of observing all of that. So with that, signing off of today's transmission of the Ministry of Assumption Absolute, my name is Lucian. I am a divine embodiment coach. Check out the Liberation Chronicle, where you get direct access to me, and a weekly newsletter. Just released the Manifesto of Erotic Vitality. So definitely check that out. As I said, it's one-on-one access to me and the Dispatches from the Edge of Obvious podcast as well. Both of those are available to you for free and will be dropped in the show notes. And I thank you so much for liking, subscribing, share this with somebody that you're helping wake up, which waking up is not dramatic. It's just realizing it's been you all along. Until next time.